2nd, 2010, Councilman Smith, Chairman. I'm joined by Council Member Tony Cardenas. Ms. Perry is en route. We don't have a time. Mr. Zine and Reyes will not be here, so we'll begin without them, with a lack of a quorum. Anything we decide will go forward with the recommendation of the chair. With that, Mr. Cardenas, I consent if you were willing items 2, 4, and 5, and 6.
Concur.
Okay. Those people here on 2, 4, 5, and 6, you may go. Those are approved to move forward. 5 and 6 is a note and file.
Okay.
Not approval, it's a note and file.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. And we'll begin at the request of Guillermo. Where's Guillermo? Is he here? There he is. All right. We held him here for 2 hours last time, so we'll give him a professional courtesy. Let's take 8 and 9 actually can be together.
Okay. Morning, John White, City Clerk. Item 8 is a Board of Police Commissioners report relative to the Police Department's criteria used to report and classify crimes as gang-related protocols for determining which types of incidents necessitate involving gang Russian service providers and related trends pursuant to motion Cardenas Parks v. Czar and motion Parks v. Czar instructing the CLA to report with an evaluation of the Justice Policy Institute's report, Gang Wars, the Failure of Enforcement Tactics, and the Need for Effective Public Safety Strategies. Item 9, motion Cardenas Reyes requesting that the mayor report relative to the use of the Youth Services Eligibility Tool to screen grid zone program participants and related matters.
And 8 is not yours specifically, but it relates to what you do, and it's also LAPD. Is there someone here from LAPD on 8?
Yeah, please.
So we can discuss both of those. Morning. Who's first? Number 8.
Good morning. Good morning, councilors. My name is Bill Hart. I'm a captain at Gang and Narcotics Division. And also with me is Detective George Martinez and April Romero, who are two of our top experts regarding any issues dealing with gang membership. Were there questions that we could answer for you?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. There's no question that gang membership has risen nationally. We unfortunately have the title of being the gang capital of the country, possibly even the world when you use that particular description of gang. But at the same time, not all crimes that are occurring in a certain community are gang related. And the reason why we have this motion and we wanted to get an understanding as to what the policy is within the police department, as to what methods do you use to categorize an incident or a crime or a call that is gang related. We've had some interventionists report to a particular situation and try to help out with the situation, and then they come to realize, for example, it was a domestic violence dispute or an argument with the neighbors or what have you. It really wasn't about a particular gang or a particular gang member interacting and or some kind of interplay with other activities that are actually gang related. So we'd like to get a picture as to what the department uses when they actually categorize an incident or a call and say this is a gang-related crime or an incident.
Well, if the victim or the suspect is a documented gang member, it is categorized as a gang-related crime. Sometimes that is not the same as a crime committed in furtherance of the gang's activity.
You got it.
But it is categorized as a gang-related crime.
Okay, but so my question to the department is, I can understand the logic of doing so, yet at the same time, does it actually add value to have that statistical information as a month report goes down or an annual report goes down or a decade's worth of reports goes down, and we show X amount of gang activity when it comes to responses from the department and activity that the department is engaged in with those particular individuals, gang members or gangs? So the reason why that's important to me as a policymaker is because I'm budgeting you, the police department. We're also budgeting the mayor's office, who happens to handle direct gang-related programs. And then we're also trying to write to the feds and to the state and to the county and coordinate and try to help people understand that we have a pretty good picture as to what the gang involvement is and the rate of incidents and the issues that are going on in our community. And everybody uses your reports when it comes to X amount of gang activity. But if, for example, if there's a dispute with a neighbor and one of the people in the dispute is in fact a gang member, or a reported gang member, documented gang member, admitted gang member, how is that incident a gang-related incident or crime?
I understand your concern, Counselor. I understand your question. Based on our current criteria, the only reason it is a gang-related crime is because a gang member was involved in it. That's our current definition, and maybe it is something we need to take a look at.
Yeah, but that's something that we should take a look at, because, for example, if you have somebody who is, say, a lawyer, and they live in a certain zip code, and they're involved in a certain amount of certain kind of activity or what have you, we don't then say, once that person is involved in other incidents, say they committed a white-collar crime, and say they did 2 years because they embezzled $100 million from some company or something, and he had a damn good lawyer, and he's back out on the streets in 2 years. Subsequent to that incident, if that person gets into an argument with his or her neighbor, we don't label the other activity or previous activity with him categorically, but yet when it comes to gangs or gang members or certain zip code communities, we're ready, willing, and able to categorize it as a gang incident or a gang crime when it comes to us getting a call. And the reason why I'm having this dialogue with you, and I know we're all busy, is because I think it's critically important that we categorize things as closely as possible to where they should be categorized. Because we're funding based on this information, we are asking for funding based on this information, and we're creating policy when it comes to funding around this information. Yet when it comes to the day-to-day usage of that funding or the day-to-day usage of those reports, your department is using them perhaps as much as anybody else. And then also we have other departments now or other related activities going on to try to reduce crime, yet okay, I'm just going to be blunt. It appears that the way we're doing it right now, it's causing us a false understanding as to where to put the resources and what kind of resources. Yes, Guillermo, did you want to say something?
Councilmember, from the perspective, the pragmatic perspective of intervention, what our office does in the field, we tend to look at the issue of gang-related in this way. There is a description of gang-related based on criteria used by LAPD. However, we tend to look at the neighborhood, and if that incident, be it a robbery, a carjacking, a homicide, has the potential for creating retaliation, then we look at it as gang-related. What that means is that there may be an event that takes place in one neighborhood that is not specifically carried out by two gang members. So from a programmatic perspective, we tend to try to evaluate, is this incident going to create retaliation? That is a little bit different because we're practitioners, we're not law enforcement. That's the way in our office we tend to look at our collaboration with interventionists around the issue of, is this likely to create retaliation? And sometimes it does. Sometimes it's a domestic violence issue, sometimes it is a carjacking, sometimes it's a homicide, sometimes it's just a plain old beatdown that creates retaliation. So we need to kind of separate a little bit the issue of how it gets defined from a law enforcement position and the pragmatic way in which practitioners need to respond to these incidents. Hopefully I'm shedding some light on this.
I think you're describing more closely the actual response to a particular incident.
Correct.
With particular individuals.
Correct.
But what I'm talking about is, like I said earlier, once that report or that incident is accumulated amongst all the other dozens or hundreds of incidents around the city on a given month, and that is generated into a report and then analyzed, either by the department or somebody else, and then we look at a quarterly and then annually and then longer-term reports, it gets lost, that those nuances get lost and they get lumped into gang-related crime or gang crime. And one of the biggest problems that we have is the heightened idea that if it's a gang-related crime, then that was some kind of crime at a very high level that required a high level of response. And there are cases where it's just not that.
Maybe I can shed a little more light on it, Counselor. Gang-related crime is defined in a certain way for a couple of different purposes. Number one would be who is going to investigate it. And if it is a gang-related crime, different detectives may be assigned to that investigation. But in terms of statistics for determining which areas or assessing the level of gang-related crime in a particular area in the city, there are only certain crimes that are evaluated for that. In other words, your example of a neighbor dispute involving a gang member would not be a crime that we would analyze in terms of what part of the city needs resources when it comes to gangs. Mainly those gang-related crimes would be the Part 1 crimes, the serious crimes. And there is a list I can go through that outlines what we do count when it comes to statistics.
Okay. I appreciate that and that explanation, and so I can have a better understanding of the response to particular incidents. Yet at the same time, what I'm getting at is how can we sharpen the policy at the department? Either, for example, I have a motion that was introduced in 2008 when it comes to having the Board of Commissioners look into whether or not we can bifurcate and or fine-tune the reporting of particular incidents and or crimes and get a sharper understanding, certainly for statistical purposes. I would never infer that as a council member that I would have anything to do with how you respond. That's up to the department. The council does not engage in that, nor should we. However, when it comes to us understanding what's going out there on our streets, what's going on out there on a monthly, quarterly, annual basis, or be it looking at it from a decade's point of view, if we could actually have either the commission and or the department work with the mayor's office, work with my office, whoever you can, so that we can go ahead and sharpen that so that when we look at it in retrospect over time, that we have a much more accurate picture as to how many crimes are actually truly gang-related and required the kind of response that you would have in a gang-related crime or incident versus something where a gang member was involved. Let me give you a perfect example that I personally don't think would require a higher level response, even from the grid office per se. Let's just say somebody lives in a house and all of a sudden somebody gets a call because there's two neighbors arguing. And then all of a sudden they get out there and then say an officer comes, somebody says it looks like there's a gang incident, and then all of a sudden an interventionist happens to come across the situation. And it just turns out that the guy is upset because his neighbor keeps parking his car in front of his driveway, right? And all of a sudden the officer walks up and says, okay, gentlemen, calm down, what the heck's going on here? A interventionist happens to walk up and says, Smokey, calm down, right? So they separate the two guys, and then they speak about it or what have you. They both go into their homes. The other guy promises not to park into his driveway or what have you. That goes down in history as a gang-related crime. I don't think so. But Smokey is a gang member. Maybe he's even a shot caller. Maybe he's somebody that strikes fear in the minds and the eyes of everybody, right? But that I don't see that as a gang-related incident.
I don't think what you described would go down as a gang-related crime. I didn't really hear a description of a crime. It's a dispute.
A dispute. But I keep saying dispute and or crime. I've been saying that all morning.
If a report, police report, crime report were taken, it would be categorized as a gang-related crime because one of the participants was a gang member. It might not necessarily be one of the types of crimes that we keep the statistics on in terms of allocating resources, though. In other words, if it were a...
Well, see, hold on a second. I think I know where you're going, but see, that's the problem that I have as a policymaker. I don't know that. I don't know that there's an extra effort to make sure that when you have that kind of incident on another zip code, right, the guy's parking his Rolls Royce in front of his neighbor's yard, and they both live in mansions or what have you, and they're having an argument, okay? And all of a sudden, same thing happens, except not the interventionist. I don't think an interventionist is going to show up out there, but PD shows up. Same incident, different zip code, right? Everybody goes about their business. But I'm not sure that PD is not documenting that at a higher level than they are if it happened on the other side of town, where there was a gang member involved, a known, identified, self-proclaimed gang member involved. Do you get what I'm saying? I'm not sure about that. I want to make sure that if what you're saying is correct, that the department is actually playing out the documentation as you just described. You said, sir, that's not the kind of thing that would likely be documented.
I can tell you very few watch commanders in this department are looking for a way to elevate a crime to a Part 1 crime when it's not. We're trying to keep those numbers down as much as possible. And if there's a wobbler issue where it goes, they're going to take the lower rather than the higher. Mm-hmm. Most watch commanders.
Yeah, but see, the thing is, when you have a dispute on the other side of town, and the guy parked his Rolls Royce and his neighbor has had it, they finally get into a big old argument threatening to hit each other or what have you. That doesn't get the kind of attention nationally, locally, on the Channel 7 News, and the LA Times, on the blogs. It just doesn't get that kind of attention. But whenever you have the term gang or gang member, it does get a certain kind of attention, what have you. And all I want to do is make sure that however we're documenting it in our police department, that we are in fact erring on the side, well, I think for the wrong reasons, compared to where I'm coming from, that we are not documenting things as gang, scoring it as another notch for a gang incident, a gang incident, a gang incident, and we're overplaying that. Look, if I'm completely wrong, then let's get down to the bottom of it and I'll move on. But the thing is, I'm trying to address this from a vantage point of understanding policy-wise. How big is the problem with gangs in the city? There's no question it's big. But how big is it? It matters to me. Is it 42,000 crimes a year? Is it 38,000 crimes a year? Is it 20,000 crimes a year? What is it that's gang-related? Because I'm funding programs based on a lot of information, and this is one of them.
Well, again, Councilman, I think maybe I'm not making the distinction clear, but crimes are evaluated based on the elements, not who was involved. We do keep track of who was involved for other reasons, but when it comes to the statistical data, you know, only those crimes that reach a certain level.
Take my example of the car parked in the driveway. By the time the police get there, somebody's getting the brains beat out of them. Now what?
Well, if someone is getting their brains beat out,
okay,
it's a felony assault.
Part 1 anyway.
You got it. So, okay, it's a Part 1, but categorically is the word gang crime, is the term gang crime utilized in that report?
If the gang member was the suspect or the victim, it would be.
Okay, I apologize for my previous example. It was too light. This is the example that I'm really looking for and to understand. So that is a gang incident, that's a gang crime, that's something that goes down and is documented as gang related or what have you. What terms do you guys use in that example?
That would be a gang related felony assault.
Okay, Guillermo, how do you guys look at it?
If I could interject one thing, remember that many of these gang members are either under, they're either parole or some entanglement with law enforcement before, almost all of them. and a simple fight can send them back to prison.
Sure.
And so the department needs to know, and if they have a gang relationship, they'll go back and check. And if they're on a parole, constraint of some sort, or they're going to go back to jail if they're doing that kind of stuff.
Thank you, Chairman, and you know a lot more about this stuff than I do when it comes to reporting to a scene of a crime, as you're out there all the time in your capacity as a reserve officer. But what I want to make it very, very clear. My interest is in no way to suppress the truth, in no way whatsoever. All I want to do is make sure that we have things reported categorically that make sense in a way that we can interpret that information and make policy decisions based on it. That's my interest, 100%. Whether or not that person gets sent up for 5 or 10 years for violating parole or what have you, that's a tertiary aspect of what's going on. I just want to know, how are we categorizing that type of incident? And I believe that if we're categorizing it in a way that that's a gang-related crime, when it was not motivated by the gang activity, it was not motivated by anything that was going on other than a dispute based on an incident that could happen anywhere in the city, with or without a gang member involved. That's
Might be the best thing to do is not take an action on this today. And if the captain would be so willing, I'd be happy to go out, and maybe you and I could go out on a Friday or Saturday night to Foothill or Mission and talk to some of the folks out there, the watch commanders, because they're the critical element in determining these things, and just ask them how they deal with these things and give them those circumstances and ask them what they would do and see what they have on their books, and they can kind of enlighten you. And then if there's a need for clarification. But let me ask, when you report Part 1 crimes to the FBI, is gang now a subset of that? Or do they care?
Is gang crime I don't...
For the FBI reporting?
Actually,
Part 1 crimes.
your name again?
For homicide, they only really care about homicide.
Just
and-
homicide
Can you
only?
state your name again?
My name is April Romero. I'm
Thank you.
Senior Clerk for LAPD Gang Narcotics. What our IT department reports to FBI is homicide and ADW on PO.
Okay,
Those
just
are the
those
only
two
two that
categories.
they
So the rest of them that he's concerned about,
Yeah.
it's just a matter of LAPD policy
Yeah.
then?
It's for LAPD for deployment purposes.
Thank you.
That's good to know.
So you know more about these nuances than I do.
Well, that's an important one for you, because then you say, if this is our policy, can we clarify it more? It's not required by FBI. then.
Yeah, exactly.
That's-
They're not making the distinction
Yeah.
for us. We can do that internally within our department. Okay. That's a great suggestion. I would love to do that.
We'll do that.
Get a better idea of what's going on the ground so I can understand, and maybe I can be a little bit more
Always-
clear with.
It's always fun to go out in Foothill on a Friday or Saturday night anyway, so.
That's where I grew up.
All right, so.
Although I
enough-
never, ever had to go to Foothill.
Under force.
Just want to make that clear.
Under
Correct.
force.
Exactly.
So we'll take number 8, we'll hold it off calendar, bring it back at a later date, and we'll go out and,
Thank you
have
very,
a
very
fun
much.
one. Thank
Really
you.
appreciate it.
Number 9, and for the public record, the audio record, we've been joined by Councilmember Perry, and she consents to the previous actions on consent items, so.
2, 4, 5, 6.
So, number 9.
She already read it, so. Guillermo?
Which one is number 9?
Cardenas Reyes, when it comes to report relative to the YSET.
Correct. We started to discuss this last week a little bit, and in the interest of getting even more clarification, Dr. Karen Hennigan, who is one of the researchers that worked on the YSET, is here with us. So I will put you through the programmatic. I will describe how it fits programmatically. In our grid zones, youth between 10 to 15 years of age are viewed based on community factors as being at risk for gang joining, meaning that there is a community profile that has been documented by the needs assessments that put these youth at risk from a community perspective. In addition to that, the prevention strategy has moved to evaluate 3 different domains: the individual risk factors of the youth, what kind of personality that youth has, his internal functioning, his peer group risk factors, and the family dynamic risk factors. So I tend to, and we present that to the community as the fever. The YSET tool, it is a tool that is, I think of it as a thermometer, which measures how elevated those individual, peer-based, and family risk factors are, with the goal of designing a list of services that specifically address individual risk factors, peer-based risk factors, and family-based risk factors. One of the issues that has been, one of the programs that has been very important in letting the community understand these risk factors has been taking it from, no offense to any PhD, but PhD clinical language, and describing it in family-friendly terms so that both referral sources and families can understand what these risk factors are. The risk factors, as Dr. Hennigan will tell you, are rooted in many, many years of research. I think that the issue, it appears, has been not fully understanding the risk factors and instead focusing on the thermometer rather than the fever. We have found that the more we explain to communities about the nature of the fever and what it might imply, the higher the number of effective referrals, the eligibility rates have gone up, and it's been less difficult. It's become increasingly easier for providers to come up with services that target specific risk factors. I believe I presented some numbers to the committee last week. There were close to 3,000 families receiving services that have been deemed eligible for services through this evaluation. And this year, we have refined what the providers are doing so that they can be more specific in targeting individual, peer-based, and family-based risk factors.
Now, when it comes to, it's good to know the number of families that are receiving services based on the YSET results.
Mm-hmm.
And again, as I said last time, I really do appreciate the efforts from the mayor's office and the diligence and the sharpening of all of these methods and the honesty that you're having with yourselves. I really do appreciate that. Now, when it comes to the youth that have not qualified through the YSET and their families, about how many of those have been referred? And on top of that, are we able to get feedback as to what's happening once they're referred?
We're putting together currently a list which we started requesting it from agencies last week as a result of the questions that you raised. Not just the numbers, but which specific agencies they were referred to, and I can report back to committee on that. As of this morning, and the list is coming in slowly from providers, I had roughly over 800 that came in, and given that currently all of the youth that are receiving services are being retested, because they get retested every 6 months, I can report back to committee with a list of how many youth and which agencies they were referred to.
Okay, so hopefully you'll have a very, very good picture as to the results of those referrals.
Correct.
And not only just whether or not they were able to get help as to what the numbers are, what the percentages are, and also at least down to the detail of
what's happened with them.
Organizations.
What's happened with them. It's really important to take a look at did these youth get better without services? Did they get worse? Are they the same? So all that is part of what you're calling the learning process.
Yeah, and also, Guillermo, I'm hoping that what you'll be able to identify, if it's happening, which organizations seem to be getting most of the referrals, or which organizations perhaps are out there ready, willing, and able to work with these families and yet aren't getting referrals. because, you know, a lot of what goes on the streets is relationship built.
Correct.
And there might be organizations that aren't being referred to, and they're servicing those same zip codes that other organizations might be overburdened with referrals. And they're not saying no because they do good work, they do care about these kids, and they want to be there to help, right?
There's another component of this referral process besides what you just brought up, which is that we've just established what we're calling community action teams, precisely to focus on that issue of are the services in each gang reduction youth development zone, is the complete range of services being leveraged? Because you're right, referrals are about relationships. And managing the relationship with the referral source is as important as managing the relationship with the family you're serving. So we've come up with a very specific criteria of how to respond to referral sources, how do you manage that, how do you track that, with very specific step-by-step, and we're meeting with all the providers around that.
Excellent, thank you. We're looking forward to that feedback. And also, when it comes to the controller's audit and the UI evaluation, they both stated that the three main researchers of the Grid Evaluation Advisory Committee are actually the same individuals who designed the YSET. And one of the
Excuse me, I'm sorry, I missed that, sir.
The individuals who designed the YSET are on the Evaluation Advisory Committee, the Grid Evaluation Advisory Committee?
There are two of them, correct.
Two of the three? Who are they?
Malcolm Klein and Karen Hennigan.
Okay. All right, so two of the three. So Cheryl Maxon is not on the...
Carol's on it, too.
Cheryl Maxon also, sir.
So it's three, okay. I had three, okay. These three individuals are some of the same individuals who designed the YSET, and the YSET is actually something that I've heard people talk about in different parts of the country. All eyes are on us. What is LA doing? It sounds pretty good. It seems like it's a pretty robust effort that they have out there, and it's pretty sophisticated. So that being the case, what comes to mind to me is, how do you feel about the people who designed the YSET being part of the actual advisory committee that we're supposed to be making adjustments? I'm assuming it's not only for us to say, wow, this looks great, but it's also to be looking at, whoa, wait a minute, we might be missing the mark here. Where could we change things? How do we reset things?
Well, I think initially when the grid office rolled out the YSET initiative, our internal research capacity was not as developed as it is becoming now. So this evaluation advisory committee was has been very useful in feeding information back to the grid about evaluation and research. Since then, one of the recommendations made was that the grid office develop its own internal research and evaluation capacity, which is what we've done recently. So in general, the Evaluation Advisory Committee has been very helpful. And one of the suggestions, both from the Evaluation Advisory Committee and other feedback, is that the grid office needs to have its own internal evaluation and research capacity.
Mm-hmm. Now, I'm glad to hear that, and that you're being proactive about it. And I think one of the items that's on the schedule today actually discusses that, correct?
Which is
about an evaluator, internal evaluator?
It's an internal research director that would be kind of our link with the evaluation.
Okay. So that being the case, Guillermo, how do we make sure that we're being completely honest with ourselves? Because if you have an internal evaluator, which I personally agree that you should have one, and then we have some of the three individuals who are well vested in the actual creation of the YSET, being a part of the Evaluation Advisory Committee, how do we make sure that we have enough third-party, non-vested individuals to make sure that we're being as honest as we can with ourselves to make the proper changes as we see fit?
Well, let me just clarify. The evaluation of the grid office is not being done by the Evaluation Advisory Committee. It is being done by the Urban Institute. That I know of, they have pulled no punches in evaluating what needed to be corrected, and we've responded to that very pretty much immediately. The Evaluation Advisory Committee, their role was to advise exclusively the grid office in matters, in general matters of evaluation.
Not just the white set.
Not just the YSET. I think that definitely not just the YSET. So the evaluation is being conducted by an external independent firm that has been, while balanced, certainly in a very effective way, I think, critical of the areas that we've needed to correct, and some of the changes that we made have been as a result of that. So the Urban Institute hasn't been rubber stamping what the grid office does in any way. This Evaluation Advisory Committee has been primarily an advisory group that was really not even formalized until February of 2010. This year, because when I came on board in September of 2009, it was just a voluntary kind of ad hoc group. And we thought for the record it would be important to have them formalized with what their function is and all of that.
Excellent, thank you. Those are the last of my questions on this item, Mr. Chairman. I just want to once again thank you, Guillermo. I'm very, very confident with the forthrightness that's coming out of you and your team, and I really appreciate working with you. And I think we've come a long way, and as we talk a little bit further on some of the other items today, some of the things that are coming together, such as alignment, things of that nature, are really telling of how much growth has happened. So thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, Ms. Perry? Okay, so you have some more items coming back. Do you want us to hold this item, or just note and file it, and when we get the reports back, we'll deal with them separately?
We'll hold this item.
Okay, we'll hold this item then. Then we'll take number 7, which is also grid-related, and then you can go.
Item 7, communication from the mayor relative to the U.S. Department of Justice 2010 congressionally selected program grant awards in the amount of $1,200,000 for the Newton Gang Reduction and Youth Development Zone and $100,000 for the San Fernando Valley non-grid zone. You have before you a CA report on this matter.
This is an item we're being joined by Mildred Lopez, who oversees the admin team, and this is an item, as you stated, to request permission to accept funding to do several things. One is to provide services for the Newton grid zone, both prevention and intervention, to provide services for the non-grid San Fernando Valley intervention, which, as a recommendation from this committee, our office was asked to secure funding to expand the intervention services in San Fernando Valley. And there are some other items.
Hi, Camilla Fong from the CAO's office. As Guillermo mentioned, the mayor's office is requesting acceptance of 2 fiscal year 2010 congressionally selected grant program awards totaling approximately $1.3 million, and they're using them primarily to implement grid activities in the Newton and Watts grid zones, as well as the San Fernando non-grid or target area zones. Some of these activities include the RFP results and selection of a proposed contractor for gang intervention services in the San Fernando target area. The recommended contractor is Communities and Schools. Sole source agreement with Cal State University Los Angeles to provide research consulting and evaluation management services of the city's grid service delivery model. A sole source agreement with USC to provide continuing oversight and maintenance of the YSET assessment tool. An amendment to utilize 35th program year CDBG funds to finance the Watts grid zone intervention services provided by Cush Reaching Out, and a request to issue an RFP for the selection of a contractor for the development, implementation, and coordination of citywide reentry initiative.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. So I'd just like to, I'm sorry if I missed it. I was trying to follow various portions of the document as you were explaining. Thank you. This is a 24-month grant, correct?
Yes,
So from July 1st, 2010 through June 30th, 2012?
correct.
Okay. All right, so we're 6 months into the first of the 24 months, so, which isn't bad. I've actually looked at some grants, we're like 16 months into it, and we're finalizing the line items, et cetera. So thank you very much for all the diligent effort. There's, when you look at the table, it's a very broad and good use of these funds. I think that it's a good use of these funds. Guillermo, can you help us understand, it looks like when it came to the summer night lights, it appears thankfully there was enough resources from other areas that you were able to shift some of this over, $100,000 in the revised amount. So $100,000 is not going to go to the summer night lights, and then you're able to utilize it for other purposes. And then also when it comes to the prevention services at Newton, previously the original amount was for $343, now it's $282, and you're able to shift the money over to other uses.
Correct.
Okay. What happened with summer night lights? We were fortunate enough to get resources from other areas, or?
For last summer,
Yeah.
Well-
I'm assuming it was last summer, unless it's just an adjustment for the upcoming summer.
we didn't
Table
use,
shows original amount 100,000 and then revised amount 0 for summer night lights, as far as these categories.
correct, we were able to use contractual savings.
Well, that's even better, contractual savings. Excellent. Good. Also, I just wanted to comment and recommend that when it comes to releasing the RFP on the re-entry, because that's one of the components we're gaining some ground on, and I think you agree that it's still not enough. Unfortunately, we haven't found the resources to do enough re-entry.
We both haven't found the resources, and I think nationwide, folks haven't found a real model that everybody feels comfortable with. So this is actually an amount for a pilot project, not citywide services, but for a pilot project. The issue with reentry is, since we do not have control of what takes place inside, it is difficult to design a reentry program.
Excellent, and which comes to my next recommendation is, it appears that the CAO report is using figures from the 2004 and 2006 information from parole, and it appears that parole actually has some relevant data that is actually as current as some information from 2009 and also 2010. So that's a lot more current. So if we could establish a better relationship with parole, which is not a city function, so if we could establish a better relationship with them and then make sure that they're affording us the most accurate, up-to-date information, so we can have the most accurate, up-to-date answers to how we're going to handle our issues. In addition to that, I also recommend that you develop a working relationship with Laura Abrams over at UCLA School of Social Work. She drafted a young offender reentry blueprint that identifies specific geographic areas and zip codes within the city and the county of Los Angeles that shows the highest rate of juvenile reentry and areas that are most in need of reentry services.
What school is Laura Abram from?
The School of Social Work at UCLA, not USC, UCLA. Even though we're doing a lot of work with the professors over at USC. They're not the same school, not even close. But they all do great work. That's what the chairman gets for giving me the floor.
Don't call for a vote on that, because you're going to get outvoted with this committee.
I said they both do great work.
Yeah,
I said they both do great work.
Really. Go ahead. Yeah, not even close.
So this is a young offender transition program.
Yeah, basically, she did a report with the County of Los Angeles that is, again, real-time. I think the report is actually finalized as we speak. So again, great information, real-time information, and with that was something that was commissioned and worked through the County of Los Angeles, which also, we're all aware that we're in the middle of the County of Los Angeles. Every inch of this city is within the county. So it's relevant information for our youth. Also, hopefully we can make sure that we're focusing on areas of reentry in the populations of most high and utilize evidence-based practices as best we can. again, that's something that perhaps your office is more familiar with than anybody in town. So if we could continue to, again, utilize as much of the resources that we can that are real-time, and I'm sure it's going to take relationships and communication amongst all of us to make sure that we're as close to what's going on today, rather than unfortunately having to utilize information or resources that are a bit out of date.
We'll get that data updated.
Okay, once again, thank you. It's been wonderful working with you. Thank you.
And that'll be note and file also? Good action on that?
No, you see a report in front of you regarding the acceptance of the grants. I'd like to approve those recommendations. They'll go to council.
All right, approve
Second.
approve the CAO recommendations. Thank you. All right, item number 3.
Item 3, Department of Animal Services report relative to amending the LAMC to expand the ban on sales of animals to include banning purchase. And motion, Perry Cardenas, instructing the Department of Transportation, with the assistance of the city attorney, to report relative to the posting of signs at locations in the Santee Alley area of downtown Fashion District, stating that the sale of live animals is illegal.
Good morning, council members.
We'll just ask some questions.
Great.
Just tell us quickly what the expansion of the ban means.
What we're trying to do is to attack this problem from both directions. Right now, it's illegal to sell the animals. We're trying to better communicate with people who are buying them, maybe sort of unawares of that side of the law, that what they're doing is illegal and ultimately inhumane, potentially.
Would you do me a favor? Would
Yes.
you put this up on your website, what we've done? I'm going to put it on mine because we go through cycles on this, as you know, where we go in, we do sweeps, things calm down for a while.
Yes.
And then, especially towards the
Builds back up.
holidays, it starts to go back up again.
How about we do a press release? But
Yeah, we can put that. We can all
post
put it
that.
out there and just get it out there, and news advisory, put it out in the papers, everywhere where we can put it. So we can-
Absolutely.
And I think it's wonderful that your strategy includes getting it on both ends,
Yeah.
buying and selling, because maybe we can finally put a stop to this.
try to squeeze it from both sides.
And now, is there a difference? I know when you get towards the spring holidays, you get the little baby chickens and things like that. What kind of animals are they selling down there right now?
Actually, they're still selling baby rabbits, and I think there was just a big sort of a bust just a few weeks ago. We have some rabbit organizations which help us take those babies and nourish them until they're old enough to get adopted. So we still have a problem with baby bunnies, birds. Turtles, of course, are a health hazard as well as, a danger for the animals.
Yeah, well, I'm glad that you're continuing to do this, and I think this merits all of our support because it's an ongoing problem. That's not the only thing we battle,
Yeah,
but that's just one of the many things. But this is important.
yes.
Ms. Cardenas?
Yeah, just curious on the rabbits, when they spay and neuter the rabbits before they adopt them back out, just like dogs and cats, right?
Yes,
Okay.
that's city municipal code.
Thank you. And then also, the information, are you able to get the information out at least in Spanish as well as English? Because that seems to be a big community that is both selling them and also, unfortunately, I think a lot of them are unaware. They think it's cute and innocent and they're buying them.
I agree. I think it's a lot of unawareness. Yes, we've talked about some sign ideas. I know there's been some discussion between transportation and recreation and parks for some areas and our department about how to get signs up. Yes, I think we'd want them in English and Spanish.
Okay.
Some areas maybe Korean as well.
Is there, speaking of language, I'm reminded every time that I look at the crosswalks and stuff when it comes to the Olympics and things of that nature, you go to other countries, they have symbols. Instead of saying don't walk, there's symbols. Is there any way to use symbols in this information, especially when it comes to signs, or are we just going to do it with verbiage?
No bunnies.
I think we probably may have to focus on verbiage. A lot of the symbols that sort of international symbols relating to animals are like animal has to be leash or biting or something. So I'm not sure there's any pictographs that would really give people the impression, but we can look into it.
Okay. All right.
Absolutely.
Thank you. And then one more thing. You mentioned, council member, that there's a lot more things going on over there that we need to address, not just this, but it's unfortunate. I think that Tom LeBonge is encouraging the selling of illegal food is making the bacon-wrapped hot dog the official hot dog of the city, because they do a lot of that over there, too, on the streets, unfortunately. But I guess we can address that at some other time. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Next, we can have the officially adopted botulism as the city of LA's disease. Physical disease, yeah. Thank you. So we'll go forward with approval of the recommendations of the board on that and ask the city attorney to draft to prepare an ordinance. Return to
Thank
the committee.
Very good. Item 1, motion to Corey and Smith directing the fire department to immediately suspend for at least 6 months the submission to collection agencies of any delinquent fees under the hazardous vegetation inspection fee program and to report to council on the status of the program prior to resuming any bill collection proceedings.
Morning. Any members? Mark Storms, Assistant Fire Marshal. Sal Martinez is with me. He's the Acting Director of Administrative Services this morning. A couple of issues relative to this motion. We would like to formally request that the verbiage be modified to not be as broad a wording. We have a sample that we're willing to submit to the committee to narrow the focus of the restriction. In addition, we would like to revisit the due date to when we would send it to collections to January 1st, which would allow us to get it to collections prior to the beginning of the next brush season. Both of those would eliminate confusion. Back in 2009, in the 2009-2010 budget, the council directed us to reinstitute the $13 initial inspection fee. As we move forward with it, it was implemented during the time that the staffing was reduced. There was some issues with the mailing, and there was, it was just bringing the system back online had some confusion. With the help of numerous council offices and their staff, those issues were handled with the public. But we did end up with at one time 24,000 that were still in dispute of the 131,000 that were sent out. At this point, there's still a total of 17,511 that are ready to go to collections, representing about $598,000. To this point, Sal Martinez has indicated we're at $1.5 million in collections relative to the initial inspection fee, which was we're right on target with the amount that was approved in the 2009-2010 budget for the initial fee system. But this city policy does mandate that these go to collections. There has been time during this process to allow us to clean up and eliminate as many problems with the mailing, the address, the property owners as possible. As this has gone through the process, I feel very confident that we would be ready to take a clean database to collections January 1st.
Right. Okay. How many do you think it'll still be by January 1st?
At this point, the 17,511, there's about another 1,082 that there's some dispute. So at the most, that number would grow by 1,082. If you figure half of that would probably be a realistic number.
And how does that compare to previous years?
Well, we don't have any numbers to compare to because the system, this is our first year of the initial inspection fee.
Initial fee, okay.
Right.
Very good. Mr. Curtis, go ahead.
Thank you. But when it came to thousands of property owners sent in their checks, they're cooperating, but unfortunately there wasn't enough information on some of those checks to see which property they were referred to. Have we been able to sharpen up the communication and the requirement that they either write the address or the parcel number or something on the check, or the check, is not deemed accepted unless it has certain how are we handling that?
Yes, Councilman. Our intent is to, what happened in the first go-around was we sent out a notice, and we specifically asked, this is just notifying them. They were not to submit a check. So they submitted a check without any reference to the property, and it took our staff some time to ensure that we are not penalizing anybody that in good effort did their due diligence and submitted it early. So that was a little problem. This time around, we're recognizing that some people might not have looked at the instructions, so we're being very clear, and we're doing our utmost to ensure that all the coding is on all of the documents that we sent out, so anything that comes back, we can quickly tie to that residence having paid their amount and not go on any retention list.
So basically you feel confident that you've thought through identifying, in case somebody wants to be super proactive and get it out of the way, even though we're not asking them to send in a check, that there's enough information that if they want to go ahead and do that, even though we're not asking them to, hopefully they will go ahead and put information on there so we don't have that problem.
That is correct. And we're also taking other steps. We're implementing a new and improved database, working with ITA that'll streamline things. We're adding some scanners to help us just process all the paperwork that much faster. And we're sort of recovering from the hit we took last year from E-Rep. We did get authority from managed hiring to hire a few more accounting clerks to focus in on this next cycle. So we would really make a concerted effort to reduce any problems in this next cycle based on lessons learned in the first cycle.
Yeah, it's unfortunate getting confused or having to go back and forth on a $13 check. We're certainly going backwards at the end of the day. Yeah.
In addition, the fire department brush clearance unit we're working with ITA to get an improved phone system so that we can make contact with the property owners. They are looking at improving the website information to cut down on some of the numbers of phone calls. And a simple thing is trying to keep the cost down in mailing. Last year, we used an innocuous envelope, and it ended up, we feel a great, thousands of them that were in the trash as probably as seen as junk mail. And we've addressed all of these issues. Sal's staff has worked diligently with the brush clearance unit. I believe there's about 20 recommendations that we've already been meeting on to put in place for next year.
Ms. Perry? Okay. You have one card for the public. Dr. Williams?
Dr. Clyde Williams, 4115 Barrett Road, El Sereno, Northeast LA, suffering from a bad cold. So I hope I don't give it to anyone. Basically, it's a great motion except for one thing. Will it be effective? And I've already submitted some written comments that it needs to be amended. Why not cancel all of the collection agency referrals for last year? Because it was a mess. Everybody accepts it. Inadequate resources, a fee of $13, most people just write a check for $13 rather than going through the hassle of even reading the notice. So they see the $13, they send a check in, so they think it's finished. Well, it wasn't finished. And by the way, one of my central issues is consistency of application of the regulations. You can go along Mulholland Drive, you can go into CD 14 and El Sereno, and I can show you areas that have not been cleared for years. Years, not 1 year, but years. Whereas next door neighbor has to clean his lot and may get a fine. So arbitrary enforcement of the regulations, inadequate resources to control the system that they implemented. And yes, hey, true cost recovery. If it's going to cost $25 per parcel, hey, raise it to 25. Make it significant. I think the 13 was established based upon market acceptance. Would the market accept it? Yeah, nobody will complain about 13. If it goes to 20, maybe. If it goes to 50, wow, that's a lot. And I do mine every year, and I took my file and submitted it directly to the office and the valley. Why? Because I didn't trust the system to notify me if it was inadequate, incomplete, or accepted. Thank you.
You can stay there because your public comment is next. So with that, the fire department is requesting this language, and I think this is the language was instructed with LAFD to suspend the submission to collection agencies of any delinquent initial inspection fees and related penalty fees under the Hazardous Vegetation Brush Clearance Initial Inspection Program until January 1st, 2011, and to report to the council on the status of the program 1 month after the initiation of the collection. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
All right, so that will be added to the file, and we will, do we approve? Wait a minute. This is approve it with the amendment then. So that'll be the case. Thank you. And then public comment. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
And public comment. Dr. Williams.
LAFD, Fire Department again. Does anyone have a copy of the modified coverage plan? Have you ever seen it?
It's not in use at the moment.
Have you ever seen the relocation plan for brush clearance? I haven't. I've tried surfing the internet, tried requesting it from the...
Because it's not in effect at the moment. It's not in effect at the moment. Okay. It's not, it hasn't been in effect for the last month or so. We'll be going back to it shortly, so.
It's not online?
No, it wasn't because we weren't doing it for a while. We're going back to it
I understand that, but before
this
it
week?
was suspended.
Sunday again, so. The chief was here last time, he heard you, he said that we'll post that when it goes back into effect.
But it's also a matter that we just discussed brush clearance. Every year, supposedly, the fire department reallocates their forces in order to satisfy the brush clearance. Be prepared. It's a great idea, except for prevention is better than cure. Why did we have to reallocate fire resources, spatially since they're so limited, when we have the most stringent brush fire clearance requirements in the United States? Why? I don't know.
Pretty simple. When brush fires start outside our jurisdiction, and the winds in the valley can blow them for 20 miles, embers, fires will start all over the place.
I know. But how about for Mulholland? Is that outside our jurisdiction?
No, but Thousand Oaks is, and the LA County is. So when fires get rolling outside our jurisdiction, the embers will fly as far as Catalina.
Have a much longer period to respond. There's a whole bunch of details.
Okay, yeah.
But there's a basic element. Why, when we have the most stringent? Because it's not enforced consistently between the uplands and the lowlands. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes today's agenda. Thank you very much.
Yeah.